Alright, so for today's video, I'm going to be changing out my front rotors and brake pads. I think both of them are pretty well worn out based on what I'm hearing. So it's making a lot of noise, but the rotors are warped and I think it's metal on metal contact now. Let's just say I got my money's worth. But I'm going to go ahead and remove both the front wheels at the same time. It's a 3/4 inch socket and I'm going to use an impact. If you're using a big ratchet to do this, you're better off loosening these on the ground, because typically when people put wheels back on, they way over torque them. But I'm going to use an impact. So both front wheels are off. I have them both underneath the frame of the truck. I have two jack stands. The jack is currently supporting all the weight in the front. And then I have a rubber chock. So this side doesn't look too bad. They both do need to be changed out. Definitely, there's no way around that. But over here, there's definitely metal on metal contact going on. And I swear to you guys, just started doing this yesterday. There was a little bit of warpage. You know, you can kind of feel your brakes when the rotors are warped a little bit. There was a little bit of that going on. But aside from all that, this only just started happening. And what's even weirder is these pads, normally they have the pieces of metal on them that squeak when they go bad or when they wear down after a certain point, and these brakes have never squeaked. So I thought that was kind of weird, but whatever. The easiest way to change these out though is you're going to have to remove your caliper, which there's two bolts here and here, or a bolt here and a bolt here, and then we'll suspend it probably off of this arm right here. You don't really want to have a whole lot of weight on there, but a good way around that too is to get like a bucket and tip it over and then just set it on top of it so there's no weight on that line. Right, so next step is to get a 13 mil socket. Just loosen them up. You may need to give them a couple love taps. Just set that down. Now we have access to our pads, which, as I said, pretty well worn. They definitely need to be changed. So we still have to remove the caliper bracket to get the rotor off, and those are both 15 millimeter. That bolt's removed, and the one in the back is almost out. Easy enough. We'll just set these back here, and looks like I'm going to have to pull this cap off. So with a little bit of coercion, we got the cap off, and now we just have to remove that cotter pin. So these are really simple to remove. I always remove them like this. I've found through the years that that's the easiest way to do it. So now I'm just going to remove the retaining cap. And now we'll need, let's see if I can get it with this. There we go. These aren't really meant to be on there all that tight, because the cotter key is actually what does the work of holding everything together. And then there's the, looks like a thrust washer for the bearing. And the wheel bearing itself, which everything is all nice and greasy because this thing was just run. So let's see how hot this thing is. There we have that. So one thing you don't want to forget is to pull the old seal and your wheel bearing out of there, which you can replace that seal if it's bad, Often I've had very good luck with pulling these out like I just did with this one and not ruining them in the process. But the trick to do that is to have the old rotor flipped over and then use a screwdriver that'll reach down in there and then just lightly tap on top of the bearing here with the screwdriver. You don't want to damage it. You could also use, you know, a small wooden dowel or, you know, something else if you don't really want to use a screwdriver, but just lightly tap it. I always use a mallet to do that, so that's all there is to that. We will have to throw some new grease in there, but that's no big deal. And I'll show you guys how to repack the bearings. We'll do it the same way both times, but we'll do the smaller one just because it's easier. So to grease your bearings, this is all you do. You just kind of work it in. And these bearings are still good, so I'm not really too worried about them, but that's all you do is just pack them in. And just rotate the bearing around. This is really messy, so you kind of want to be careful not to get this stuff on anywhere else but your gloves, because if you get it on your clothes, it's not going to come off. And so these are ready for reinstallation. Now the next step is to basically just put your bearing back in, like so. Now this particular rotor has the ring for ABS. I don't think this truck has it in the front or not, but it's the same rotor and it was the same price, so I just tried to err with caution. So we have our bearing retaining seal, and all you do is just pop it back in. That's all there is to it. So now you're going to have to lube up your shaft. Insert shaft joke there. And just get a big glob of this stuff. Just coat your shaft so it's nice and lubed up. That's the best way to lube her up. And what we'll do now is plop the new rotor on with the bearing and make sure the back is seated up against the flange of the axle. But you guys can't easily see that on camera, but you'll just have to take my word for it. So throw our wheel bearing back in, thrust washer, our retaining nut, which we'll just do this finger tight just so everything stays together. And a good tip to do is just rotate your rotor while you're doing this, because you'll have to put this on. Now I am going to tighten it up just a little bit more. These don't really need to be tightened all that much, so just so it's nice and snug, I'm going to leave that where it is. And the whole idea behind this is this locks the cotter key to the nut. So we can see there's a nice hole there for a cotter key. In aviation, I'm actually totally used to doing these cotter keys in an entirely different way, but I always have to make myself remember that I'm not working on an airplane right now. So that's on, that's all put back together. Now just throw your cap back on, tap it back in place with a rubber mallet. Make sure everything rotates just fine and you're not hearing any noise, because that is a big thing. You always want to check that before you go back together with everything else. So now we can put the bracket back on, and it also has these old brackets on it, which these are for the brake pads, and the brake pad kit you bought should come with it. So it just slides right back in like this, and it can only go on one way, so it is mechanic proof. And I'll just have to throw the other one back in to the top. Okay. Both those are on. Still no contact where there shouldn't be. So let's get our pads ready. What we're going to have to do though before we do anything else is compress the two pistons back into the caliper. It is definitely a pain in the ass sometimes to do that, but I'll show you how I do it. So what you'll want to do first is take the cap off of your reservoir, because you're displacing fluid by doing this. That's what those pistons are doing when they come out like that. As the pads wear down, those pistons come out further, so your fluid level in your reservoir drops. So you always want to, especially if this thing is full, take your cap off, because that fluid's going to look for a place to go. If you don't remove that cap, you might get lucky and it'll still go through underneath the cap, or it, could go through somewhere else or bust a line. But you always want to make sure to undo that cap, especially if they're out that far. And this is the easiest way I've found to compress pistons back down. But you just get a big C-clamp, a long piece of wood, or a few like I have, and just start pushing her down. And we're almost there all the way. So we'll just cheat a little bit on home stretch here. But that should be down plenty far enough for our purposes. So just remove all that, save it for the other side. So now on to the pads. Alright, so now the next step is we have both of these retaining clips that we're going to have to replace. And all you do is just pop them right back into the caliper bracket. And again, these can only go on one way. So if you put them on the wrong way, I don't know how you did it, but they can only go on like that. So we also have, which they provided us with, is a new bracket for the caliper itself, which we'll just pull the old one out. Let's see how this thing comes out. We might need to get in there with a screwdriver. And it just comes out like that. So throw the new mounting bracket in place. And easy enough. So set that aside, and we'll put the new brake pads in. So here's the meat and potatoes of the operation, and you guys can clearly see a difference here. The other side's a lot worse. We'll get to the other side here in a minute, but this should rectify a lot of our stopping issues. And we'll also put some grease here on the outside. We'll install the other pad like so. And they were gracious enough to include some new grease with it. Throw a little bit. And there's going to be metal on metal contact. And to be honest, I've never really had much of a need for this stuff. These are full ceramic pads, so you're not going to really have much of an issue with noise making to begin with. But we'll grab the caliper, see if we got the pistons in enough. And we do, and everything just slides back on. It's really simple. A mechanic shop will charge you, several $100s to probably $500 to do the same exact job, and it's something you could knock out yourself in the span of about an hour or two at a much cheaper price. Now, I did buy the more expensive brake pads. I wanted the full ceramics, so that did cost me a little bit more than the cheaper option they had, but the cheapest you can probably do it if you buy everything from AutoZone like I did. It's probably around 90 or $100. However, if you want the better stuff, I think I paid about $140 to do all of this with the better brake pads. And we'll make sure they're nice and snug. now we can make sure everything's good. Now, it will take a little while, but your brake pads will need to seat in properly. So there is a braking period on them. All right, so both the tires, or wheels rather, are back on. But I wanted to show you guys just how bad this was, or is. So this is the inside. You can kind of see it's got this line that's going around it. So there was some metal on metal there, but this side is by far the worst. That's definitely metal on metal contact. And what's even weirder is here's the pad for the outside. It didn't squeak at all, but there is really pretty much no meat left on this pad. This one there's still a little bit, but it's just really weird that there wasn't any squeaking or noise that was coming from this wheel. It was just basically the end result of it. So check over the cap here again, and you guys can see it brought the level up just a little bit. So won't need to add any brake fluid, and just got to take it off the jack now, and we'll give her a test drive. Alright guys, so it's definitely a hot one outside today. It's about 100 degrees right now, but we're going to do some moderately high speed stops here to seat these pads in. Do a couple more forward, a couple in reverse, and we should be good to go from there. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Everything seems to be working okay, and we'll all stay classy.